I do not know what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Albert Einstein. Welcome to another episode of Uninformed America, where today we're going to be talking about ideological debate. So sit back, relax, grab a snack. Let's check this out. What's happening right now in America can be pretty confusing, especially when it comes to world issues. We are encouraged not to speak about politics, race, or anything of real value. So many of us never learn from others' insights. We stay in our own small town or bubble, socialize with like-minded people, and we don't like to discuss anything of substance. We like to ignore. Why is it that we avoid ideological debates? Why don't we ask others, what do you think? As Gen Z, we are heavily influenced by social media and the confirmation bias that comes with it. Only problem with that, we never have the incentive to have a difficult face-to-face interaction. Americans avoid topics like race and inequality like the plague. Discussing and addressing political issues would mean dismantling the entire system, as well as the way we think and the way we have been shaped by society. American politics is like a CVS receipt, long and complicated. By the time you reach the bottom, most people feel more lost than a toddler in a corn maze. And our politicians, they're like an ever-growing trail of empty symbolism and fear-mongering, which no one can ever follow their platforms or red lines. How can things change without lack of communication? The system created was human-made, and only humans can tear it down. Fact. We are on a direct course towards World War III, and a recession like the likes that Americans have never seen, and the U.S. is leading the charge. It's time to break it down and see exactly how we got here. Okay, so this video will be broken down to 3 parts. Part 1 is hegemony. We get a Cliff Note version of this, of exactly what hegemony is. Today, we're going to go into more depth. 2, lobbyist. How it all began, and what exactly does it really mean? And finally, World War III. How close are we? And what will happen? Dun, dun, dun. So like, comment, and share. Number 1, hegemony. So what exactly does that mean? Well, in facts, the 1% are low-key pulling the strings to make us common folk think we are all living the dream in this so-called beneficial economy and social order. They're using sly tactics like media to sway our thoughts and keep us in check. It's like really playing a sneaky game of manipulating consent, all while making sure their ideas reign supreme. Sounds like a real mindfuck, doesn't it? There are 4 different types of hegemony: political, economic, cultural, and military. Because cultural entwines the majority, that's what we're going to discuss today. So what is cultural hegemony? It is a country's control over a region that will influence the culture of the region. The best example is the United States. American movies show off popular American styles, beliefs, and ways of life in theater all over the world. It also maintains racial bias, how certain ethnic groups act, behave, dress, etc., even if it's not true. That means that American fashion designers, movie makers, and media are creating a culture that is not just popular in the U.S., but is also seen by billions of people who might want to be a part of it. This cultural influence is making the world more similar to each other. And it's belief that cultural hegemony turns the world into a more harmonious entity. But is it really? Everyone loses or places their own culture on the sideline. Really best for everyone? Or cultural hegemony is really sneaky, like a ninja or a cat tracking its prey. You don't really always see it, but you know it's pulling the strings behind the scenes. political prisoner Antonio Gramsci, about a century ago, coined the concept and was all about figuring out how the big dogs in society kept their power. You'll be surprised to hear it isn't through violence, but shaping the minds and molding beliefs. For example, in the 13th and 14th centuries, peasants worked about 150 to 175 days a year on their land. Even the miners or farmers who worked 180 days per year seemed harsh. Fast forward to today, where the average American receives a measly 8 vacation days a year. We're working more than the peasants. Talk about a downgrade. Yeah, we have Netflix and Hulu to soften the blow and give us an illusion of luxury. But when your modern work hours are longer than those of the medieval counterparts, labor laws can't really be taken seriously. In America, capitalism is the way. Historically, capitalists have been masters of the art of virtual signaling to keep the little guy down. Gramsci has stated that billionaires and multimillionaires aren't satisfied with simply having wealth and power. They want our hearts and minds as well. Too often we hear, "It seems like nobody wants to work these days." And corporations or folks with housekeepers and nannies preaching about virtues of hard work leading to the American dream. Well, this enables the 1% to feel good about themselves while dodging any responsibility for the glaring inequalities in our society. They want only loyal worker bees. No questions asked, no matter how measly our pay or how hazardous our workplace. It is all part of the grand scheme to maintain the status quo. And if you dare speak up and demand change, then you're a radical conspiracy theorist, or you want the Russians to win. Cultural hegemony is a cunning like a fox. They come to you as an ally or deliver much needed advice. Wrapped up in this advice is a diabolical layer of faux connection. Top 1% and politicians pass out wisdom while pretending they just another pal who's been there, done that. Reality TV, social media, and other shows do their best to make famous lives seem like they're just like you. As you watch their personal dramas on our screens, we start to believe that they're just regular folks dealing with the same romantic and family issues that we face. But let's be honest, it's all BS. We only see what they want us to see, the carefully crafted character that they have created, blurring the lines between what's real and what's for show. Keeping up with the relatable act helps them all earn our trust. Their end game? To connect, capture our attention, and ultimately sway our opinions. Falling into the gap means different cultures have their own special qualities that make them stand out. But they also help determine how important a group is in society. The bigger and stronger a cultural group is, the more influence they have over a certain area or other groups. This influence can affect how people live their lives by setting the rules and norms that everyone follows, whether they want to or not. In other words, they force you to conform. What happens if you stay true to your culture? You may be on the tail end of the food or resource chain. Think of culture as a huge jigsaw puzzle. They were all about contributing pieces. We all have a say in how the final picture looks, but there are some groups, usually smaller, that have a bit more input in the overall completed puzzle. We'll call them the puzzle masters, deciding what puzzle pieces go where and what gets discarded. Puzzle masters are tricky folks. They will give you the illusion that everyone is in agreement with a completed puzzle. That doesn't mean that it's the universal truth. Even the media. They're a powerful entity, shaping the way we talk about and what we care about by cherry picking which stories to highlight and how it is delivered. They have the power to sway public thought and steer us towards thinking about what's trending according to the top 1%. Social media, however, namely TikTok, while some platforms are sharing data and folks' location, enabling assassinations, others give marginalized voices a chance to be heard and spread their groundbreaking ideas, allowing everyone to bypass the gatekeepers and speak directly to the masses. This is true empowering conversation. So the next time you're watching a scripted TV show or news and spot a new trend, just remember, it could be part of a grand scheme orchestrated by the artist of illusion trying to avert your attention. Then just to be sure, jump on a social media platform not monitored by the government to see what real people find interesting. Just be careful. Social media can be a great force of counter-hegemonic resistance, or it could be an echo chamber for the top 1%, all in the same scroll, almost like a choose-your-own-adventure game. But instead of finding a treasure, you end up sipping the same Kool-Aid as those you wish to keep you exactly where you are. Plot twist! Remember, consent is not manufactured. One subscribes to it. Understanding politics is like trying to navigate a minefield while wearing clown shoes. It's ruthless, cutthroat game where pleasing everyone is like finding a unicorn in your backyard. I wish I could find one. No matter how noble your intentions, someone is bound to be throwing shade. It's no wonder people feel like they're on a different planet from their elected officials. But hey, we can't stick our heads in the sand forever. Also, the lesser of two evils is still evil. Number 2, lobbyists. Lobbyists is like American politics' oldest trick in the book. Back in 1792, some Virginia veterans were like, "Hey, we want more money for fighting the war," and hired a dude named William Hull to sweet talk Congress into copping up some extra cash. The term lobby started being thrown around in state houses in the 1800s. And before you know it, people were camping outside Congress chambers trying to charm those politicians into seeing things their way. And hey, thanks to the First Amendment, we all have the right to petition the government, which apparently includes the right to lobby. The sweet sound of persuasion in action. Clearly, lobbyists has evolved since 1792. But how exactly? To wrap our heads around those seemingly contradictory truths can coexist, let's take a jaunty journey through the evolution of lobbying from the days of our founding fathers to the chaotic present. Believe it or not, there are actually fewer registered lobbyists in DC now than in the past 20 years. But something is definitely off balance in Washington. We got corporations shelling out a whopping $2.6 billion a year on lobbying expenses, which is more than the $2 billion as taxpayers dish out to keep the lights on the House and the Senate. It's like we got a financial seesaw going on here. And let's just say the corporate side is starting to get a little too comfy up in the air. Since the early 2000s, we've been watching this gap widen to the point where it's practically a canyon. I mean, how is lobbying even legal? Let me break it down. Number 1, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution includes language that bars Congress from limiting individual freedoms, including the right of people to petition their government. This language can be interpreted from the beginning to extend the protection of the right to lobby. Number 2, President Ulysses S. Grant reputed to have them coin the term lobbyist, referring to the men who populated the lobby of the famed Willard Hotel, approaching him for influence. However, Some sources date the origin of the term to lobby as early as 1837. So the U.S. grant story is in dispute number 2. By 1876, lobbyists were required to register with. In 1995, Congress passed the Lobbying Disclosure Act, LDA, to tighten up requirements for disclosure. It is widely known that many lobbyists underreport activities or fail to comply entirely. Shocking, I know. In 2007, the Honest Leadership and Open Government Act of 2007 was passed to increase the level of reporting and transparency in government. In 2015, the Carmen Group, a lobbying firm, was charged with a $125,000 fine for failing to disclose lobbying activity, marking the first charge of its kind since the 1995 legislation has passed. Finally, currently lobbyists are defined as those who spend more than almost it's their job or something. As this timeline unfolded, lobbyists quickly realized that the Department of Justice was about as lax in enforcing disclosure rules as a teenager with a curfew. Firms started treating reporting requirements like they were optional, skipping over them with a wink and a nod. Meanwhile, the world of lobbying was transforming faster than a chameleon at a rainbow convention. Lobbyists began getting creative, finding new ways to work their magic outside the confines of the rules. Strategic planning, grassroots campaigns, and other stealthy tactics became the new norm. The end result? There are now fewer registered lobbyists in Washington than there are obscured Star Wars characters. Lobbyists in Washington than there are obscured Star Wars characters. It's truly a political jungle, and only the sneakiest, most conniving survive. Enter the new era of lobbying in Washington, D.C., folks. Thanks to the wonders of social media, gone are the days of slow-moving strategies and behind-the-scenes maneuvers. Now, lobbyists can just slide into reporters' DMs and tweet directly about legislation, directly about legislation staff, faster than you can say dark money. With just a few clicks. Nonprofits, trade groups, grassroots organizations, and corporations can now reach a wider audience and sway public opinion with the power of a well-crafted hashtag. When corporations began to dip their toes into murky waters of political, their approach to lobbying was more like a squirrel crossing the street, cautious, reactive, and desperately trying to avoid getting squashed by the regulatory truck. They were like a pack of scared little puppies yelping at the looming threat of consumer protection, or whimpering at the thought of labor law reform, and barking madly about the government trampling on the sacred crown of free enterprise. But as the time marched on and labor movements lost their spark, and governments started lining up in favor of industry, corporations began to see politics not as a threat, but as a potential treat. They went from lobbying as a group of scared puppies to a pack of hungry wolves, sniffing out every opportunity to grab a juicy bone of profits and assistance from the government. As for their lobbying efforts grew from a timid whimper to a wolf snarl, corporations became more focused on their own interests, like a dog trying to retrieve a treat stuffed inside of a chew toy. Their investments became more targeted, more aggressive, and more worldwide, fueled by the cutthroat competition to be the biggest, baddest lobbyists in town. So who are the top 10 lobbyists in America? Number 1, surprise, U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Didn't see that one coming. 2, National Association of Realtors. 3, Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. 4. American Hospital Association. 5. Blue Cross Blue Shield. A lot of health thing up here. 6. Meta. Shocking. Remember TikTok? Yeah, they lobbied for that. 7. American Medical Association, American Chemistry Council, and 10. AARP. Top lobbyists have been working overtime to help their clients zigzag through the maze of regulations coming from the Biden administration. It's like the high-stakes game of regulatory hopscotch as billions of dollars in funding, grants, and tax credits are being dished out faster than you can say Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and CHIPS and Science Act. It's kind of hard, but get what I'm saying. It's a lobbyist dream come true, or a nightmare depending on how much caffeine they've consumed. Just so you guys know, P.S. Amazon was number 11. If lobbying is as American as apple pie, what's with all the tension with regards to AIPAC? Well, AIPAC, also known as the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. AIPAC, also known as the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, is under the super PAC, the United Democracy Project, the UDP. Is a foreign interest group that claims to be nonpartisan, but definitely has a favorite in the Israel debate. It's all about unconditional love for Israel. These people will defend Israel against any and all criticism, no matter how questionable their human rights record may be. These guys are like that one friend who always has blind allegiance to Israel, no matter what. Even when the government's making moves that would make it the most die-hard supporters raise an eyebrow. But that's not what's happening but that's what happens when 365 out of 435 AIPAC. Kind of makes sense why the current big G in Palestine is very one-sided. Enter Reject AIPAC, consisting of 20 advocacy groups, a powerhouse coalition to push back against AIPAC's attempts to hush up all the juicy disagreements brewing in Congress over Israel's actions in Gaza, stating that AIPAC advocates for the U.S. foreign policy directly at odds with human rights and international humanitarian law, and has supported an unconditional flow of U.S. military funding and weapons to the Israel government. That has been used to support human rights violations against Palestinians. Gen Z, yeah, we're not afraid to voice our objection, especially when it comes to the big G. The latest opinion polls show that there's even a growing fan base for the boycott, sanctions, and divestment (DBS) movement. AIPAC is all in a tizzy over the whole Israel being compared to apartheid in South Africa thing. It's like they just can't handle the heat when it comes to a human rights group calling them out for their not-so-peaceful practices. I mean, who knew that pointing out the obvious would cause such a stir? Guess the truth hurts, huh? AIPAC has been known to play a little game of choosing wisely with their supports with our Congress members. Rumor has it that if a candidate dares to accept certain endorsements, they can kiss AIPAC's backing goodbye. It's like the ultimate political ultimatum. Choose your friends wisely or risk losing some serious big G donor love. Some have been said, and I quote, I've seen people who have had said, I can't vote that way because I don't want AIPAC's opponent. I don't want an AIPAC opponent. Said Representative Mark Pocan, Democrat of Wisconsin, and an outspoken critic of the group. That says a lot. AIPAC is basically the dark money group in Washington. In 2003, they broke records by raising a boatload of money, and their super PAC is sitting pretty with over $40 billion to blow in campaigns. And guess what? Democrats and Republicans alike are lining up to drop some serious coin, with big shots like hedge fund guru Paul Singer and WhatsApp wizard Jane Common getting in on the action. Money talks, and AIPAC is definitely speaking the language of power, getting in on the action. Money talks, and AIPAC is definitely speaking the language of power and influence. So what does this registered 50C4 get their funding? And now let's slow it down here and start at the beginning. Since it was funded in the 1940s, remember Israel became a country in 1948, AIPAC was like Scrooge McDuck of lobbyists, hoarding its cash, refusing to dip its pockets for elections. But oh, how times have changed. Now they're ready to make it rain like a monsoon in the rainforest to support their pro-Israel pals and take down anyone daring to question the current Israeli military actions. With over $100 million to spend on ads and propaganda to defeat anyone who tells them that killing children is just not okay. 501c4, Social Welfare Organization. That means contributions to AIPAC do not have to be made public under federal disclosure laws. Traditionally, AIPAC has kept the identity of its biggest donors a closely guarded secret. But hey, some secrets come out in the light. So the shining stars of the 2020 donor list read like the who's who of American elite. From the power plays of professional sports teams to muggles of private equity and real estate. This elected group is a melting pot of success. We got a Maryland congressman eyeing a Senate seat, a former maestro of Victoria's Secret, the brains behind the Zuma dance revolution, and the genius behind Mellows, charming the hearts of children everywhere. It's a lineup that proves philanthropy isn't just for the faint of heart. It's for the fabulous and fearless. True to form, using trauma, a massacre when a grenade attacked and killed a woman, a mother and her 2 children in Israel many moons ago, to justify the slaughter of over 60 Palestinians in retaliation, gave birth to AIPAC like a twisted, cunning yet powerful lobbying organization. I.L. Keenan saw an opportunity to spin the narrative. Concerned that the Kibbutz incident would tarnish her image, he decided to create AIPAC to control the damage and shape the propaganda. Out of all the ashes of tragedy and on the hills of slaughter is how it all began. Always wanted to control the narrative, AIPAC has expressed concern about how they're being viewed today. According to Senator Christine Gillard, Democrat of New York, on January 18th, she joined a donors-only meeting from the front lines to Capitol Hill, stating, "We're losing the communication war," she added, to absolutely horrific rhetoric against Israel, accusing the country of genocide. Shocking, I know. Accusing them of occupation. Yeah, we know. Accusing them of white supremacy. Oh my God, that too. It's beyond recognition. There is no truth to these narratives. Actually, there's truth to all the narratives, but okay. In other words, these darn Gen Xers are not buying what they are selling. A leaked memo to The Intercept showed the New York Times is playing a real game of Mad Libs, substituting controversial words like genocide and ethnic cleansing with more agreeable terms in their coverage of Israel's actions in Gaza. Gotta love a newspaper that puts a positive spin on things. Well, anything. In the memo, The Times, from the Standard's editor, Susan Welling, journalists are advised to steer clear of using terms like genocide, ethnic cleansing, and refugee camps when discussing Palestine. They're also instructed to avoid calling areas of Palestine occupied territory, and are discouraged from even mentioning the word Palestine altogether. Furthermore, the memo suggests that the words like slaughter, massacre, and carnage are just too damn emotional to accurately describe Israel's bombardment of genocide. She wants everything to be kept cool, calm, and light while we send billions in taxpayer money to Israel. So, some people ask, what does Israel do? Do they even have any exports? Yes, they do. Diamonds. Now, you might be saying to yourself, I didn't know Israel had diamond mines. Well, neither do we. And because they don't. They don't dig up the diamonds themselves. Oh, no, no, no. Instead, they import rough diamonds from places like Russia, Canada, and Botswana. And when they in their magic at the Israel Diamond Exchange in Tel Aviv, the Hustling Hub is home to over 15,000 people from about 1,500 companies, making it the ultimate hotspot for all things diamond related. So the next time you're rocking a dazzling diamond, just remember, it may have started its journey in a bustling apartheid diamond exchange of Israel. Bustling apartheid diamond exchange of Israel. So why does the U.S. give Israel aid? Yeah, you gotta think of the U.S. like Tinkerbell to Israel, sparkling with financial fairy dust for decades. Uncle Sam was quick to give Israel a thumbs up when it was like, hey, I'm a new country now, in 1948. Since then, the U.S. has been BFS with Israel, providing it with more cash than your average sugar daddy. All because of hegemony. Mainly cultural hegemony. Israel is like the ultimate wingman for America in the Middle East, providing strategic positioning, top-notch intel, and some serious impressive tech collaborations. Back in the day, Israel was basically Americans' cool, level-headed friend who stepped in to balance out the annoying Soviet budding relationship in the refused Western hegemony, which has caused conflict because homogeneous entities are lacking. Remember, everybody has to be the same so we can all get along. Unlike some countries that have mutual defense pact that's going on with the United States, like Japan and NATO members, well, Israel may not have the exact same deal, but they're definitely hanging out with us on one of the select few major non-NATO allies. And that just says they have some VIP status access to all the latest and greatest U.S. military gear. Israel has basically been living the sweet, sweet foreign aid life on the backs of American taxpayers. Seriously, they raked in a whopping $300 billion, adjusting for inflation, since day one. Sure, Uncle Sam has been pretty generous with other countries in that region like Egypt and Iraq, but let's be real. Israel is a golden child here. They're like the favorite grandkid that always gets the extra cookie at grandma's house. Since October 7th, 2023, the United States has enacted legislation providing at least $12.5 billion in military aid to Israel, which includes $3.8 billion from the bill in March 2024, in line with the current MOU, and $8.7 billion from Supplemental Appropriations Act in April 2024. So, are there any conditions or restrictions associated with receiving this aid? If you ask most Americans, no. But alas, while the U.S. is playing role of moral bouncer by saying you must have a clean record on human rights if you want to get into our security assistance club. It's like a velvet rope policy, but instead of designer outfits, we're talking about respecting basic human dignity. This is all thanks to the notorious Lily Law, which is basically America's way of saying, yo, we don't hang out with bullies. Many believe that the U.S. might be playing favorites with Israel when it comes to Lily Law. Some legal scholars and critics are raising eyebrows and asking, hey, why the special treatment? Let's give everyone a fair shake, shall we? Sounds like purchasing so many members of our Congress may need to refresh their ethical compass. I guess I explained Senate Bill S-720, aka Israel Anti-Boycott Act. Yeah, we got one of those. The bill says that Congress doesn't like a resolution from the United Nations Human Rights Council that tells countries to stop doing business with Israel. It also wants the U.S. and Israel to work together more on science and technologies. The bill changes a law from 1979 to say that U.S. should not support any countries trying to boycott friendly countries or people in the U.S. It also says the U.S. shouldn't support any boycotts against Israel from international groups. Basically, it says, you gotta like Israel, otherwise we won't do business with you. The bill also changes a law from 1945 to say that the U.S. shouldn't give credit for exporting goods and services if it's because of political reasons and if it's meant to hurt Israel. Again, clearly Congress is like, Israel's number one. This kind of makes you think in the words of Malcolm X. And he said, you gotta be careful. The newspapers will have you hating people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. Speaks volumes. Speaking out against Israel and other apartheid. Moreover, the International Court of Justice has spoken. In a bold move on July 19th, 2024, the court declared that Israel's 57-year occupation of Palestinian lands is a big no-no. According to the panel of 15 judges, Israel has been playing dirty by annexing territories, asserting permanent control, and building settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The judges put their foot down and ordered Israel to stop their settlement construction, not now, but right now. They found that Israel was in breach of Article 3 of the International Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, including racial segregation and apartheid. Israel had some of their Western allies have rejected the accusation. Some believe Americans' ironclad support for Israel has eroded its international authority and claimed to uphold the international rules-based system. Has eroded its international authority and claimed to uphold the international rules-based system. Are we witnessing the insecurity of a declining superpower? Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, aka Benjamin Malowski, is not just promising victory, he's promising total victory. Sounds intense, right? Well, history buffs raise an eyebrow at the phrase. It's got some serious deja vu resonance of a certain term that Germany describes as Nazis' not so pleasant endgame. Yeah, we're talking about the eerie word Ensiga, which basically meant final victory for the genocidal regime. It's just like a little food for thought. Maybe we should rethink our ironclad support for apartheid. If Congress members are supportive of Israel and just 9% supportive of Palestine, we have to ask some really interesting questions. The ones who are more supportive of Israel received about on average 125,000 donations in their last election, while the Palestinian supporters only got about 18 on average. The amount of money that donors gave to Congress members is pretty huge, over $58 million. Almost everyone in Congress got some kind of donation except for 33 people. So I guess our support is pretty much iron. World War III. So what exactly will happen after the bombs start falling about 72 minutes after they're launched? Well, megafires will come to a town, and that's not good. The Defense Department predicts each nuclear weapon will unleash a fiery inferno spanning anywhere from 100 to 300 square miles. With 1,000 weapons in play, the entire world will basically be one big barbecue pit. Forest, toast, cities, charged. And don't even get me started on the amount of soot. A whopping 300 billion pounds worth. That would be clogging up the atmosphere. blocking out the sun, causing an impromptu ice age. So say goodbye to your crops, folks, because without rain, agriculture is as good as done. For those of us not looking forward to nuclear winter, how can we avoid this? Well, before we can solve a problem, we must figure out how we got here. Again, cultural hegemony. Remember how we are harsher on those who haven't conformed to Western hegemony? Well, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran have teamed up to form a group against the Western countries. It's pretty safe to say they haven't conformed. These changes the focus of Russia's aggression from Ukraine to a bigger conflict involving China, North Korea, and Iran against the Western countries. What happened in Ukraine that pissed off the Kremlin? Well, Russia feels as though they've been wronged. They say that the U.S. broke a promise not to let NATO expand into Eastern Europe. This promise was made back in the 1990s, when the West and the Soviet Union were talking about Germany getting back together. Remember, they were the cause of World War II, so we had to split them up. They had to stop NATO from moving east to protect themselves. Logical, probably wouldn't want one of their bases near us. The West keeps saying they never made a deal like that, but there's tons of papers and notes from the U.S. that says otherwise. Now, that doesn't mean that Putin is perfect, but it shows that maybe Russia isn't as bad as we've all been told. Europe staying safe might not just be stopping Russia from doing crazy stuff, but also about making sure that NATO won't go too far. Quick history reminder. Back in the day, the Soviet Union and East Germany teamed up to build a good old wall around West Berlin. That ran right smack in the middle of East Germany. This wall went up in August 1967. Thanks to the support of Soviet Union leader Nikita Khrushchev and the East Berlin leader Walter Umbridge. It stretched out for 155 kilometers and split the city right down the middle, keeping East and West Berlin apart. When the Berlin Wall came down, everyone wondered if Germany would team up with the United States, the Soviet Union, or neither. The George H.W. Bush administration decided that Germany should join forces with the United States and NATO. Now, why they would want a country that started not one, but 2 world wars on the team beats me, but hey, that's what they did. In February 1990, U.S. leaders talked to the Soviets and promised that NATO wouldn't expand eastward if they cooperated on Germany. Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev agreed, and talks about reunification began. Now, this wasn't a formal, but it was clear that Gorbachev agreed to let Germany join the West, and the U.S. agreed to limit NATO's growth. Tension began when Russia's neighboring countries joined NATO in the 1990s. When NATO started talking about letting Ukraine and Georgia join, Russia felt some type of way and started acting aggressively. Some believe that NATO getting bigger doesn't mean it's okay for Putin to be all hostile and all back off and invade countries like Ukraine and Georgia, but it seems like Russia has some valid reasons to be upset, and the way the U.S. has been acting might be making things worse in Europe. So let's cut to the chase. Is the U.S. global domination coming to an end? Yes. It's pretty clear that the center of global economic power is shifting to China, and frankly, there's nothing we can do about it. We can either change with it or grow, or pretend for as long as we can that we're still the HHIC, aka head hegemony, in charge, remain stagnant, and get the wind knocked out of us. So what would change look like? Universal currency? And no, it won't be the US dollar. Back in the 1800s and early 1900s, the British Empire, remember those folks, were like, the sun rises and never sets on us. They thought they were running stuff, and they were. They were all about ruling all over the place and for like 300 years. People thought there was no way their empire would ever crumble before the 1950s because it was just too huge. Now, the same kind of thing is happening with the US dollar. It's like everywhere in the world from buying and selling stuff between countries. But now BRICS, aka Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is trying to break free from the US control. It's a big battle between currencies. The BRICS group is working together to stop using the US dollar in their trade deal. You may be asking why. One word, sanctions. Sanctions have made the US dollar very unstable. They're changing their agreements so they can use their own currency instead. They are also talking to other countries to try to get them to do the same thing. This will keep businesses in their countries to do better and make their economies stronger. It will also make their own currency more valuable. BRICS is all about thinking ahead and making big plans. They're not just focused on what's happening right now, they're looking forward to the future. The group wants to create a new currency that's backed by gold, which will really shake things up for the US dollar. They might even announce this new currency at their big meeting in October 2024. BRICS wants to change the financial world so that the countries that are developing don't have to rely so much on the US dollar. It's all about making things more fair to everyone. In the future, countries might start using a new currency called BRICS-backed gold or their own local money for trading with each other. This is because relying too much on the US dollar can be risky, especially since the US has a lot of debt. Developing countries are worried about the debt, which has reached $34.4 trillion. So they want to find other ways to trade without using the dollar. If BRICS countries decide to stop using the US dollar, it could cause some big changes. Banks would have to work hard to make sure the dollar stays strong. Also, other currencies might become more important in the forex market, which would make things tough for the US dollar. But guess what? US banks lend out millions of dollars worldwide. But that might change soon. This could mean less money floating around, which would affect on how the US dollar is worth. The banks will be the first to feel the impact in countries like BRICS moving away from the dollar. In fact, US banks have been struggling since 2020, with many even closing down. Once the banks start feeling the pinch, other parts of the economy will start to suffer too. This includes things like consumer goods, technology, and even everyday items that we all need. Prices might be going up, and inflation could become a problem. If BRICS keeps moving away from the dollar, it could really shake things up from the US and change how we live our lives. Americans have already been feeling the pinch from inflation. What comes from the US not introducing additional imports to combat the dollarization of the dollar will be the inflation that the likes of Americans have never seen. Again, we can combat this if we start exporting. The largest export that the US has is the US dollar, and it's going down. A financial war has begun, and the US is a target. So let's pause for a second and get back to the war with actual military weapons. Truth is, the fighting in Ukraine is getting really serious, especially because Russia is attacking more aggressively to try and take over more land before the US can send the military help they promise. It's a tough situation for Ukraine. Russia controls about 18% of Ukraine, or 211 square miles this year alone, in the west and in the south. It's begun gaining ground since Kyiv's in 2023 counter-defensive failed to make any serious inroads against a well-dug-in Russian troops. They're not the only ones gaining control of Ukraine. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, recently met with the big bosses of BlackRock. BlackRock, well, that's the biggest company in the world that manages money. And we all know JP Morgan. Might know that other name, Chase. Yeah, We all know them. They talk about making a special fund to help Ukraine's economy improve by using money from both the government and private businesses. A special fund to help Ukraine's economy improve by using money from both the government and private businesses. But a lot of Americans and Ukrainians don't like this idea. They said Zelensky might be giving away too much power to private companies like Bedrock and JP Morgan's. Americans feel that regular people pay for this war, our tax dollars. So why are big companies like BlackRock and Chase get to keep all the money? They're worried that Ukraine might end up being owned by companies instead of the people who actually live there. What's your thoughts on that? The fight between the Western group and the four-party Dream Team is getting worse and could spread to other parts of Europe, making things even more tense in Asia and the Middle East. Even though history doesn't always happen the same way twice, it's important to remember affecting countries like in Asia too. Back in 1938, Germany was like, hey, Czechoslovakia, we want Sudeland. And they were like, we're just trying to protect the Germans that live there. And so France and Britain were like, okay, sure, take it. But then the Nazis were like, psych, we're invading Poland now. And suddenly, before we knew it, World War II had started. 2 years after that, Japan totally caught the U.S. off guard by attacking Pearl Harbor. This made the U.S. get into a big fight with the Axis powers and made the war even bigger. Now the war was happening all over the world, with the Pacific region being a major battleground. At the time, Germany had the military hegemony. Right now, the countries with the military hegemony are the U.S. This is the first time the U.S. is dealing with two countries that have nuclear weapons. These two countries are China and Russia, and they have their own important security interests that sometimes clashes with the U.S., and they have power to pose the threat to the U.S. Looking back, we can now see how Europe kind of just tipped and fell into World War I without even realizing. Back then, nobody would have guessed that a small fight in one part of the world would turn into the biggest war ever. Fast forward today. It seems like the U.S. might be landing down the same path. The chance of a small conflict blowing up into a huge war are getting higher and higher. It's like we're all sleepwalking into disaster. President Biden wants to make sure that the fighting stayed contained to Gaza, despite Gaza not having a military to defend itself. And he didn't want Iran to cause any problems. But things didn't go quite as planned. Israel ended up attacking Iran twice. To both flex and intimidate, Biden sent a lot of military support to Israel and warned Iran and Hezbollah to stay out of it, responding that they were not the U.S. bitch. They would do what they want. The fighting spread to places like the Red Sea, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. American troops even got attacked in some places like those as well. Iran basically told Biden to take his warning and shove it. Fast forward. Now Russia's giving them more weapons. It's safe to say this is a big mess. Hezbollah keeps shooting rockets and missiles at Israel almost every single day because, well, Israel attacked them first. Their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, even threatened the U.S., saying that if there's a big war in the region, American interests and soldiers will be also warned that American ships and Air Force will face serious consequences. The Houthi rebels in Yemen, who are supported by Iran, have been attacking American naval and allied naval ships, as well as cargo ships that travel through the Red Sea. This has caused big problems because a lot of people in the world trade depends on this route. I mean, if they need it, tell Israel to stop, committing the big G. Because President Biden hasn't been able to stop Iran from defending itself against Israel's hostilities, the U.S. is now getting more involved in the conflict. This means there's a bigger risk of the war spreading throughout the Middle East. American planes and ships are now doing lots of airstrikes in Yemen. If something goes wrong, it could start a huge war that might even involve Iran and its ally, Russia. Remember them? They're number 2. The United States is worried about a new group of countries. Remember them? They're number 2. The United States is worried about a new group of countries teaming up to work together in space. Yep, our concerns isn't just here on Earth, folks, but the final frontier as well. Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran are forming a strong alliance that could cause problems for what we call global security. The air and space forces have seen a lot of examples of these countries working together in space. For example, the Russian rocket launched an Israeli satellite into space. There's also plans for Russia and China to build a nuclear power plant on the moon. And Russia and North Korea have made defense pact that would help North Korea improve its space and missile abilities. U.S. officials have noticed that Russia is using weapons from Iran and North Korea and Ukraine with the help from China in space, where the U.S. has seen Russia use a weapon near one of its satellites. This shows that Russia might be planning to use its weapon against U.S. satellites. The air and space forces are saying that the U.S. is comparing Russia's satellites to nesting dolls that can deploy weapons. Interesting doll. At the same time, leaders of the U.S. Space Force are amazed at how quickly China is expanding its space capabilities. It's almost as if they weren't just had all their money focused on military, but actual technology. Using technology to counter other countries in space and support their forces here on Earth. When it comes to space cooperation, it's almost like a complicated relationship between Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. They're all connected to things like selling weapons, energy, money, and the exhaustion with Western hegemony. Even Russia and Iran have very different ways of running their countries. They're both facing sanctions because of the war in Ukraine. This has brought them closer together, forming a partnership out of necessity. Kind of like BRICS. Whereas the U.S. military is often praised as the strongest in the world. And it's true. America spends an alarming amount of money on defense, and its top-notch air and naval power. Plus, the U.S. has many allies that help us with its military, makes it stronger. And China or Russia ever feel like they might end up in a fight with the U.S., they won't wait around. They'll want to make the first move and do it fast, so that by the time the U.S. forces try to stop them, it's already too late. For example, if there's a chance of a war over Taiwan, China will just take the island before the U.S. can do anything about it. Then America will have to decide whether or not to accept this new reality or start a big, messy fight to try and get Taiwan back. But China will warn the fighting back will come with a high price. Loss of American lives, tons of money spent, and the conflict getting even worse. Plus, it's not easy for the U.S. to take back an island that's so far away. Well, Chinese forces can easily defend Taiwan up close and personal. As for Russia, defend Taiwan up close and personal. As for Russia, they may quickly grab one of the Baltic states in the European and Eastern attacked Iran's consulate, killing 16. Iran retaliated, killing no one. Iran has been sanctioned by the U.S. Israel has been coddled and provided weapons, money, and American lives. Then Israel attacks Iran again, killing the negotiator and his entire family line. And the U.S. advises Iran not to retaliate. Now Israel is demanding a full invasion of Rafah. Again, no military to defend themselves, to avoid World War III. Currently, we are at a waiting game. Waiting for Iran to possibly retaliate and attack Israel? Who knows? Maybe they won't. Maybe Iran is showing restraint by playing three-dimensional chess. Waiting for BRICS to formulate a new currency and bring down the mighty US dollar together and work something out so that all lives can be saved. I don't know about you folks. I don't like regular winter. So nuclear winter, not really feeling it. So let me know your thoughts. Like, comment, any more ideas? Want to hear from you. If not, Jordans,